Hey everybody, my name is Keith Crandall. I'm the Science Program Specialist at the Department of Education. And here on the science team, we are so excited for our first session for our virtual specialists in the Godot community space. I want to take a second and introduce Teris Dunn-Jaglowicz. She's going to be the virtual specialist for 8th grade science. We're so excited she gets to share a perspective and experience and her leadership with science with everyone. So without any more, I will turn it over to her. Thank you, Teris.
Hi, everyone. Like Keith said, I am Teris Dunn-Jaglowicz, and I will be talking to you about 8th grade science and how to engage your students virtually for 8th grade science. So as we're starting things, just a little bit about myself. So I teach 8th grade physical science in Houston County, Georgia. That's Warner Robins in the heart of Georgia, or middle Georgia area. And this is my 6th year teaching and my 6th year teaching 8th grade science. So initially when I started teaching, we were not using NGSS and GSE science standards. So I got to see a shift in that. That was real interesting. I have a bachelor's degree in middle grade science from Middle Georgia State University in Macon, Georgia. And I achieved my master's degree from Georgia Southern University. I'm currently working on my specialist degree from Piedmont College in Curriculum and Instruction. I have I guess you could say, a strong passion for curriculum. I'm constantly looking into it and trying to find ways to change it. Some hobbies besides teaching, I like to do heat transfer vinyl shirts and decals. I love football and tailgating with my family. As you can see, my husband and we go to pretty much every home Falcons game. I enjoy baking and exercising. And some exciting news for me, I'm actually expecting my first child in April 2021. So amidst all the craziness that has gone on this past year, I'm thankful I get to still enjoy pretty much a full year with my students before having to go home. So, all right. So typically with science, when you think about the structure of how you would teach in person, we know, or we assume, science to be interactive and engaging, hands-on, collaborative, working with other people. I constantly talk to other teachers or other people in general, and the first thing they talk about is all the different labs and activities and hands-on things that they did in science class. So that we know in person, that is what keeps the students' interest. So now we're tasked with the challenge of transferring everything online. And it's just like, okay, how am I going to go about this? And I know for me in the spring, while I say I'm technologically challenged, I'm not truly, and I'm learning just like with everybody else. But it's one of those, how can you achieve that same thing? How can you accomplish those same things, but in a virtual setting? So, so for me, I think the things that have helped me that I think would help everybody else, the first thing is going to be that we'll talk about is your lesson design or structure, motivation and encouragement, your social interaction, collaboration, feedback, and then lastly, your communication. Now, I will go ahead and tell you some of this I felt as I was kind of putting everything together. I felt like they all went hand in hand. Some of them seemed to overlap. So we'll just kind of go with the flow. So think about this. Like we already mentioned at the beginning, I mentioned how in-person instruction is. And I think about my in-person class. So in-person for me, we go through all these training talking about differentiated instruction and making sure we incorporate PBIS and following a 5D model and 3D learning and trying to incorporate all these different things in our in-person. So my classroom in person when I come in is very structured. And then trying to turn around and trying to do the same thing virtually. So for me, I will say my virtual learning this year, I follow a hybrid model. So I have 3 in-person classes and then I have 1 virtual class. Now my virtual class, we do use a software that's called Odyssey-ware, but then I do also have the flexibility to use Google Classroom with my students as well, and we'll talk more about that. So my first challenge back in the spring when I was strictly Google Classroom and I found myself very overwhelmed. Like the two questions is how's your virtual learning set up for you? And are you trying to have your virtual class match what you would do in person? Spring 2020, Teris Dunn-Jaglowicz, yes, was most definitely trying to match what she was doing in person in class. Online. It was a new thing for me. It was a new thing for the students as well. And then me being the person I am, I started researching because I said, there's got to be an easier way to do this. How am I supposed to do this? So with my lesson design with online, the first thing I learned, the first thing I read, and on several different websites and different forums, online instruction does not have to match in-person instruction. So I would try to find every single worksheet, every single virtual lab. I was trying to keep it consistently busy for a 70-minute block. And I had to finally sit down when I saw that. I'm like, well, that makes sense. That might be a little overwhelming, not only for me, but for the students as well. It's just, you can make it so interesting and fun, but you can't plan out the whole entire structure to where it's bell-to-bell instruction online. Then the next thing they said was to keep it short. I know me, like I said, I'm currently working on my specialist, and even doing my homework and doing classes, I have to break things up into spurts. I remember reading somewhere online, I'd say about a year or two ago, this person said, when you look at the kids and their attention span, you take their age and add 5 minutes to it. And that's about how long of time you can get out of them. And when I thought about it, I said, okay, well, I'm 29. You add 5 years. I think that's 34 if I did the math correctly. And that sounds about right. After about 30 minutes of straight sitting there and doing something, especially on the computer, I have to get up and go do something else. So when I look at my 8th graders, they're 12, 13, 14 years old. So anything really past 20, 25 minutes, I've lost their interest. That's for sure. They're over it. They're burnt out. They need something else to do. So this is one of those, I was already doing that in person. So now as we're switching to virtual, I tried to keep my assignments and said, okay, well, any assignment that I assign, it shouldn't take longer than 20 minutes. And I tell the kids, if it's taking you longer than 20 minutes, then we need to sit down and get together and see what's going on, what you're struggling with. But we also need to take a break from it for a little while, maybe come back to it. Now, one thing I have still done, even with my online, and typically this is when I Zoom with my students, is I still start all of my sessions off or all my lessons off with a science phenomenon. That still helps me get the kids thinking, get them engaged. Sometimes they instantly start making these connections to the phenomena. For me, I work at a Title I school, so occasionally the challenge that I have with phenomena, I might have a student that maybe has never experienced this before. I say that things like for one phenomena, I asked the students, I said, well, how many of you have ever been to an amusement park and been on a roller coaster? Some of them had, some of them had not. So in that situation, I decided to instead of just asking the kids share their experiences, I decided to just take the initiative and share my own experiences with roller coasters, and we talked about different things. From there, they kind of chimed in. There is a fair that comes here in this area, the Georgia National Fair. So some of the kids were able to kind of relate it to those rides and things like that. And we kind of started a conversation from there. Now, all of my phenomena do not start as conversations. Some of them might be like an actual hands-on task that goes with the phenomenon. Here's an example of one we did recently. And I did it not only with my in-person, I also did it with my virtual because fortunately it lined up where they were doing the same topic. So my phenomena that day, I said, okay, so food looks different before and after you cook it. That was one of the phenomena. Another phenomenon was that dough goes into an oven, but cookies come out. And so from there, the kids start talking about how the things that they experience when they cook food, how they hear things, they smell things, and the things that they see, because we were talking about heat transfer and energy, or that's what we were leading into. So as a part of our phenomena, I said, okay, let's do this. I want you to draw me a model of what you think happens when you're cooking food. Draw me a model of what you think happens to the heat as you're cooking food and things like that. And of course, from there, I got all kinds of different interpretations. Some of them were very detailed. Some of them were not as detailed, which is perfectly fine. Because I remind the kids, it's very open. It's like a conversation starter almost, and we kind of share. We'll share and go around the room or go around in the session and talk about it. So as you can see, these are some of the different things that they come up with or what they thought of. The good thing with virtual is that everybody can see each other's, and I give them time to have their own little conversation, not too long, but enough to just say, hey, I really like what you did here. I really like what you did there. And I also had some kids too, their model, they prefer to just write it all out. If I allow them to express themselves how they feel. Now, and I'll talk more about this too, some other ways with virtual that you can do this as you're sharing your phenomena, if you were to do a model like this. At the time, I was not familiar with Google Jamboard and things like that, or my Viewboard. Now that I am, I can set that up to where I can do it as well. And it works like a whiteboard for the student. So you kind of give them the opportunity to use it, and you can use it as well. And they can submit it and share it to the teacher that way. Okay. These are just several different sources where I pull phenomena from. The Wonders of Science, and they're all hyperlinked in here. But the Wonders of Science, you search your standard and things like that. Sometimes it's straight by the picture. Of course, when you go to middle school physical science. The next one that I have is GSTA, GSD Phenomena Bank. This one is another good one. I've used this for a lot of my lesson plans and things like that, because my lesson plan template, whether it's in person or virtual, that's the first thing I have to submit. So that's something that other teachers are looking for and things like that, because they want to know, okay, how am I getting this started? How am I kind of getting them excited about what we're going to talk about? Okay, and there's also phenomena for NGSS, and then project phenomena as well. This one is actually a Google site. All right, virtual lab. So in addition to my phenomena, sometimes I might show them a demonstration of a lab, and we'll start talking about it from there. So the good thing is these are 2 to 3 different websites, and now mind you, all these resources are free. Our favorite word, especially for a teacher. I think my go-to is Spec Colorado Simulation. You can set up a free account. It can be with your teacher account. It doesn't have to be with your teacher account. And what happens from there, once you log in, they show you all these different simulations that you can do. But the good thing is, if you have an account, you can also see where teachers have made different handouts that can go with the simulation as well. Because I know for me, when I first started using this website, I wasn't a big fan of it. I was just like, okay, it's great. I'd play with everything for 5 minutes. And then after that, I'm like, okay, now what? What do I do now? So the good thing is, with this now that all these different teachers, and it's cross line, it's not, I try to look for middle school, 8th grade middle school. I do have some students, if I want to challenge them, I will pull a high school. Some of the teachers that have submitted worksheets have actually submitted some that are more like an extension. But it's great. I can use them either as an engagement hook, and even beyond my phenomena, if I want to do it as a whole entire lab, I can do it that way. Another good one that has some simulations is CK12. Again, this one is also free. The good thing with CK12, another thing about me, I'm currently working on my Google certification. So if anybody is Google certified or you use Google Classroom, I know there's some other platforms out there. I think somebody said Canva one time or something like that. but all of these are free. And I know CK12 will actually link to Google Classroom, which is great. So that way I can find a simulation here, and sometimes the way that some of the lessons are set up, you have a whole reading activity, and then it also includes the simulation and practice, and I can assign it straight to the kids through Google Classroom. I know some people also use Clever as well. So for us, we actually use both Clever and Google Classroom. And of course, just like with GSTA, you have to have NSTA. Now this one, most of it is free, but I think all science teachers, we know that we get a little more perks if you go ahead and sign up for the subscription and things like that. All right, so the next thing is motivation and encouragement. The main two things with that is every student is motivated differently. And I say that because with the kids, when we first started learning virtually, I would meet with the kids kind of one-on-one just to kind of get familiar, and I already kind of knew these kids, and I knew what was going on at home. I knew if there was a lot going on at home, or if they had a home where they could find like their little workspace and such. So this year, when I started with my virtual group, having never met them at all in person and things like that, I spent the first 2 weeks just kind of reaching out to each one, whether it was a call or email, and just to kind of, just to get to know them, see some of the things that they like, and try to get things set up to see, okay, do you have like a workspace set up already and things like that. I do have some students that I do have to constantly check in just because they may not have that parent at home with them right now. It might, I think, because they're in 8th grade, they're a little older. Their parents see them as a little more self-sufficient. So some of their parents still might be going to work and they're at home doing virtual. And it's a matter of, do they have the self-discipline at 12, 13, and 14 years old to do it themselves? I mentioned to a parent back in the spring when we were going through everything, and of course everybody was frustrated at that time. I said, it's almost like the kids are kind of getting a sense of what college is like if you're taking an online class in college, which is true. Even in college, when we take a virtual class, you have to have the self-discipline to do it on your own. You typically don't really have the teacher encouraging you in the background and making sure that this is done or that is done. So just a matter of maintaining that, and that kind of goes along with the communication part as well. It's just making sure that you're reaching out to all of your students, whether it's via email, phone call, things like that, which kind of leads me into my incentives as well. One thing that I've tried to do with my virtual students, of course, is send them messages of encouragement, try to call them. I've even tried to set up like one-on-one Zoom sessions with them, so that way they don't feel as intimidated with the other people. What I've noticed with my group this year is that a lot of them, believe it or not, do not really know each other, so their comfort is not quite there with the other students. They have a sense of comfort with me, and right now we're currently trying to work towards them getting comfortable with each other. I've also sent, I get free Wendy's coupons every so often, so I've done things where I've mailed them out to people, and that's when it's just different things I've done. Everybody's different. Some teachers go above and beyond to do all these things, and some they do things that are kind of low cost. I'm more in the middle, more on the low cost end. But my thing with my virtual students is that I still want them to feel the same thing they would feel if they were in person. I still want them to get those rewards and things like that. Okay, so this also kind of goes along too with my social interaction, collaboration, and feedback. As we previously mentioned, or I previously mentioned, science now is about interacting with other people and collaborating with other people. Yes, we still have our introverts and things like that, and they don't really care to work with other people, but I think that comes along with those 21st century skills that we've been trying to get everybody to focus on. So again, the challenge of trying to get the students to interact and collaborate socially, not socially, virtually, has been a challenge. So one of the things I discovered over the summer was Zoom. I think out of all the online platforms, Zoom seems to be my favorite. To me, it's user friendly. I've used Zoom, I've used WebEx, I've used Google Meet once, and there's some other ones out there. But with Zoom, I know you can do the breakout room sessions, and I like it because it gives the kids a chance to maybe do, like if I was in person doing one-on-one, think, share, or things like that, I can still do that virtually, and I can just pop in and out as a teacher. I've still done Kahoot games with my students, even if they're at home, especially virtually, because it's like a review for them. With the virtual student, they still have practice assignments to do. They still have virtual labs to do. They still have quizzes and tests to do. So it's one of those, that's one of the few things that, yes, I review in person. So yes, I need to review online as well. And even with middle school, I would think by now they would be tired of Kahoot, but no, they love Kahoot. You know, you get the basic subscription, it's free. But as I've noticed, that each time I log in, Kahoot has added more and more to it. And it's one of those, if you're willing to pay for it, great. If not, there are plenty of things that you can do with the free version of it. Because the good thing with that one, if I use Kahoot alongside Zoom, I can still share my screen so the students can still see the question, and then work on the computer as well. Now, I've had some students where, yes, they're logged in on the computer and they're doing the Kahoot with me, but they're logged in Zoom and they just do the Kahoot on their phone, whatever works for them. I mentioned Google Hangouts is another way that teachers can interact with other students. And the good thing, if anybody does use Google Classroom, it encourages that collaboration with other people because there are so many different apps and extensions that can be done. I think most of them are free. Like I said, I'm still working on the certification and getting to know. So I know you've got Google Handouts. I mentioned Jamboard. You can share documents. So if it's one of those, if you wanted to set up a project or project-based learning activity with the students virtually, you have the access to do it through Google Classroom. Another resource that I've used for years, I'm currently working on virtually, is Nearpod, and I've had to link that one as well. The good thing with Nearpod, I like it because in person, I could take my presentations to go. So with it virtually, I can still use it, but just like some of the other apps that I've mentioned, you have ways where you can poll the students where they can send in feedback to you. Like I said, with their comfort level, they may not be comfortable unmuting and virtually saying things. So you have the option to poll where they can send in their answer, and you can kind of make it fun too. With Nearpod, they can select, you can set it to where they can select the answer, or they can do a free choice. You can hide everybody's responses, or you can show everybody's responses. It's however you manipulate the setting. But that's one of the main things I like to see. Now, and I will say with my online, I try to give them time. Usually my online sessions are about 30 minutes. So I usually give them the first 5 minutes when they come in. They're on task and things like that, but I kind of give them some free time to say hey to each other. And then towards the end, I give them time to kind of, in addition to asking questions about science or some things they need to be aware of for school, I give them that time to interact with each other. That's one of the things as I've talked to different parents and students and mutual friends and things like that. Their main thing is with virtual learning, their child misses the interaction. They miss being with their friends and things like that. So it's almost like, not saying that they're creating new friends, it's more like they're stepping out their comfort zone and getting to know more people. Now with virtual, and I kind of slacked up on this in the spring, as I'm assigning assignments, I had to go back and make sure that I am still giving meaningful feedback to the students. That's something that they need. It's a reassurance thing. I know for me as a graduate student, I look for that feedback. It helps me know, okay, this is what I need to do next, or this is how I need to do this when I do it again. So continuously giving that feedback to the students. All right. So in addition to the last key that I mentioned, the main one is communication. With virtual, we kind of make the assumption that, okay, well, we're virtually communicating, we're doing this every day, it's not a big deal. No, it's still important to communicate with the student outside of just the Zoom session, things like that, but also important to communicate with the parent as well. So in the spring, for me, I got overwhelmed with trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to balance working with the students who are working and doing what they're supposed to be doing, giving them the feedback on time what they need to do, trying to contact all the students that I need to say, hey, I haven't seen you working, what's going on, what can we do, and contacting the parents as well. So I read one of the many websites when I was doing research, trying to wrap my brain and reorganize and try to get on track. I noticed one website said to set virtual office hours as if you were a college professor. I'm like, well, yeah, when you think about it. Now, some people would agree with this and some people would disagree. I think it really just comes down to how your setup is. So, for example, for me, because I'm hybrid, because I'm in person and online, I do a hard stop. My virtual hours stop at 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. I don't answer on the weekend just simply because, I tell the kids, the weekend is for you to take a break. If you decide that you want to work, that's perfectly fine, but also keep in mind that's your time to take a break, just like that's my time to take a break. In the spring, before setting official office hours, I was on the phone with students and parents from 6 a.m. till 10 a.m. because I did have those parents who worked during the day and didn't get home till later in the evening. Or I had parents who worked at night and they tried to work with their kids during the day. So I tried to be as flexible as possible then because we were 100% online. With that being not 100% online and being virtual, I do offer after school tutoring to kind of give that flexible time. And the good thing about the after school tutoring, the kids kind of pop in and out because I know if my Zoom session is every Tuesday at 12 p.m., the reality of it is, even though it's mandatory, some of my kids can't get there. It might be that their parents prefer that they not get online until one of them gets home, and that's understandable. So that's why I try to set that flexibility. But again, you have to do what works for you, but not to where it drives you crazy. And like I said, utilize more than just email. I think as teachers, we have the fear of picking up the phone sometimes and calling and just to check in. So, but I utilize my email. I utilize the telephone. I heavily utilize my Google Classroom, the stream, and I just send out announcements through there. With certain assignments in Google Classroom, the students and I, we can comment back and forth on different things. And so we just trying to keep that line of communication open. I've seen online, and some teachers to kind of as another means of communication. Some of them like to set up class Twitters or a Moto and things like that. But you just have to do what works for you, and you have to do what you're comfortable with. I know for me in social media, I'm kind of funny when it comes to social media. So that's a little beyond my comfort. But again, you have some teachers that it's completely comfortable to them. So again, just do what works for you. Some final tips and more like reiteration. Take advantage of free resources that are available. There's so many different free resources. I know one thing I've noticed, occasionally I'll find stuff on Teachers for Teachers, and there are a lot of things that are on there for free that you don't have to pay for. I know I was talking to some teachers and they mentioned, oh, well, you can buy this and it converts to digital and things like that. And I'm like, well, I'm not trying to bank the bank here, but take advantage of free resources that are available. I'm the type of person, I sign up for things. I have an email that's not a school email, it's a Gmail account, but it's strictly for education. And I use that email to sign up to get all kinds of emails, all kinds of tips and things. Make your virtual digital lesson interactive. Give the kids time to give feedback or interject or talk, whether if it's them sharing a story about their experience. I feel like with science, that's what you want because it's that real world connection. It might be something that they've experienced before. I tell kids all the time when we start talking about stuff, I'm like, yeah, when you do this, for example, like we just finished interview, I'll say, when you cook and this happens, and we're all big into air fryers now and things like that. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, we're actually now we're learning more about it, but we're putting a name to it. And then they might have a funny story to share, or they might have a story that they know that happened to somebody else. But give them the time to do that and make it interactive as possible. You might insert random polling questions and things like that because that's also to check in too to make sure, hey, are you still there? One of my first mistakes in my first session, yes, it was only 20, 30 minutes, but then I had some kids, they were like, okay, well, I just turned it on. So I'm good. I'm going to go do this. But no, I insert some polling here and there. That's my way of checking to make sure, okay, yes, you're still here. I've seen where some teachers, they do like a daily attendance thing, and they upload it. It might be a random silly question or just a check-in to say, hey, how you doing, and all that. And like I've already said, give the kids time to be social with each other. I will say with my model, because we're hybrid, something we did, I don't have a lunch class because my virtual class is not a lunch class, but the other teachers do have lunch classes. So what we did was we set up like a lunch Zoom for those virtual kids. And they got to zoom in and see all the kids in person. And, just to kind of give them that time to check in with everybody because, some of them may or may not have cell phones. They might only have whatever resources we use for digital learning. And it was nice because it wasn't just content, it was a little beyond content, and we just got to talk about some things and all that good stuff. Okay. But that is all I have for you. And I hope this is helpful. And I can't wait to talk to everyone again soon.